Good evening. I'm Ann Kinseth, Director of Education here at the Meadows Museum, and it's my pleasure to welcome all of you joining us tonight. This spring, the Meadows Museum launched Masterpiece in Residence, an exciting new loan program featuring some of the world's most significant holdings of Spanish art within American collections. We are so fortunate that the first painting in the series is the enigmatic still life by Sánchez Cotán from around 1602, titled Still Life with Quince, Cabbage, Melon, and Cucumber, which is in the collection of the San Diego Museum of Art. Tonight, we are honored to have Michael A. Brown, the Curator of European Art at the San Diego Museum of Art, with us here in Dallas to deliver a lecture titled Kept in Suspense, The Enduring Thrill of Sánchez Cotán. Brown holds a doctoral degree in the history of art from NYU's Institute of Fine Arts. He completed his dissertation on portraiture in Viceregal, Mexico, while serving as the Mayer Curatorial Fellow at the Denver Art Museum. He's been the Curator of European Art at the San Diego Museum of Art since 2014, where he's overseen the acquisition of paintings by Zurbarán, Ribera, Valdes Leal, and Sorolla, as well as the renovation and reinstallation of SDMA's galleries of European art. He's published extensively on the art of the Hispanic world, especially on portraiture, printmaking, and the history of collecting Hispanic art in the United States. His exhibition, Art and Empire, The Golden Age of Spain, was recognized by the Los Angeles Times as one of the 10 best exhibitions nationwide for the year 2019. Please join me in welcoming Michael A. Brown to the podium.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you to everyone here at the Meadows that has been so welcoming to me, and it's wonderful to be back, and it's really exciting to see this painting installed upstairs in the galleries. Before I start, I also wanted to just offer my gratitude to two people who are no longer with us, that without whom I wouldn't be standing here. Jonathan Brown, who was my professor at NYU, and of course, the Meadows' own Mark Roglan. And it was on a visit to San Diego that Mark, I think, first had the idea of borrowing the Sánchez Cotán, and it makes sense because it was one of the first Spanish masterpieces to enter the United States, as I'll mention a little bit later. And if I could just offer my gratitude to those two, it really, they've done so much for our field, and it's a great loss this past year. So, Sánchez Cotán. What more could be said about this iconic Spanish masterpiece? I actually wrote to Jonathan when I started writing an essay, and I said, what else can be said about this work? It's kind of like Las Meninas. How does one continue generating interesting things to say about such great masterpieces? But it was an opportunity to look into the painting from perhaps a new angle, and it really, people have often asked me as a curator, what makes a masterpiece? And to go back again and again to the same work of art and still derive new information, new experiences, new pleasure, is certainly one of the signs of a true masterpiece. And I think that's on display upstairs. Okay, so the artist. Well, we don't actually know much about Sánchez Cotán, apart from the fact that he was born in a town outside of Toledo in 1560. He made his first part of his career in Toledo as a leading religious painter, and his clients or patrons included the church leaders, the archbishop, as well as fellow artists and creators in Toledo. And perhaps he's best known, and even during his lifetime was best known, as a still life painter. Francisco Pacheco mentions Sánchez Cotán as a really the leading still life painter of his generation. He doesn't mention his devotional works, which is really how he made his early living. This one is San Ildefonso at the Prado from about 1600. So just a few years before he painted the series of still life paintings. You can see there's a very interesting donor in the foreground and the vision of San Ildefonso receiving the chasuble in the middle ground. It's a very well produced painting. It's clear. It's it's certainly of its era, but nothing of the groundbreaking quality of the still life is really evident here. 1603, Sánchez Cotán decides to give up his practice. Well, not give up his practice because he continued to paint, but he gave up his studio and his life in Toledo and joined the Carthusian monastery in Granada as a lay brother. And he continued to paint. In fact, it was an expectation of his entry into the Cartuja that he continued to paint for the monastery. And you can see some of his paintings, especially these large-scale paintings here, the Baptism of Christ and the Holy Family, decorate certainly a later architectural phase of the monastery. But he continued to practice his large-scale devotional paintings. Another one is seen here, which is in Granada, painted around 1617 or so, of the Virgin of the Immaculate Conception. And here, if we see in small details in the foreground, beautiful floral still life, kind of vignettes in either corner. And it does give us a sense of his appreciation of still life. And another painting that's also in the collection of the San Diego Museum of Art is the San Sebastian here, which is on copper. It's a miniature. And in all likelihood, this was influenced by one of Sánchez Cotán's friends in Toledo, who acted as one of the two people that drew up his will, which was in 1603 before he joined the monastery. And he was a manuscript illuminator. And some of Cotán's approaches to these small-scale works of art certainly came from his knowledge of of illuminated manuscript miniatures. He also was friends with El Greco in Toledo. And how do we know he was friends? Well, he lent El Greco 500 ducats. And you don't do that with, that's a considerable sum of money. And he, it's actually, I don't think he ever paid him back. And so anyway, but all was forgiven. And Sánchez Cotán left for the monastery in 1603. Now, what of still life painting? How did he begin the series of works that are listed in the inventory that Diego de Valdivieso and Juan de Salazar, who was the manuscript illuminator, the two of them list 12 still life paintings in his inventory before he leaves. And he also lists a number of books that were in his library. He was well-to-do. Apart from the loan to El Greco, he lent money to other people, and he was living a comfortable, financially secure life when he left for the monastery. But how did he start with this idea of still life painting? Well, in around 1600, you see here Caravaggio's Basket of Fruit, one of the most famous still life paintings in the world, which was done for Federico Borromeo in Milan. And Borromeo also, before this, had employed Paul Brill and Jan Bruegel to to carry out still life paintings from about 1590 on. So Caravaggio was not the inventor, but he did kind of fuel this innovation into still life. That being said, Sánchez Cotán doesn't look like any of the Flemish or Italian still life paintings. So what exactly was he getting at? And why do they look so different? They're experimental. And they were done for, I think, for a very particular audience. And the reason that we can surmise that is when we follow the history of each painting and what happened to it after Sánchez Cotán left for the monastery, we start to get a window into what his thinking was all about. So what happened to the painting after 1603, after the inventory is drawn up? And the San Diego painting is number 2 on the list of 12 still life paintings. There's also one which does not survive, unfortunately, but can be imagined, and it's described this way, as the San Diego, let me just flip back to it, San Diego picture or the composition, but without anything in it, just the empty windowsill. I mean, it probably would have looked like, an abstract expressionist painting for all we know. It's really amazing, but it was part of the presentation that he would have done for visitors to his studio to show how he would build up towards a fully populated composition. So after 1603, Sánchez Cotán gives the painting, the San Diego work, to the Archbishop of Toledo. And you can see his palace here on the left from the facade of the cathedral, and a portrait by Luis Tristan, or at least attributed to him, of Bernardo Sandoval y Rojas. And Rojas kept the painting until his death, when it was bequeathed to the royal collection and to Philip III. You can see here which in 2 different likenesses, one by Velázquez, which was in Bill Jordan's collection and is now at the Prado, and Pantoja de la Cruz's Philip III of 1605, which was also part of the royal collection, but was given to James I of England by Philip III in 1651. So Philip III then passed it on to Philip IV, and the painting was on display with other paintings by Sánchez Cotán in the Pardo Palace, which was a hunting lodge just north of the center of Madrid, and of course responsible for hanging the Sánchez Cotán in the Pardo was the king's Philip IV's painter, Velázquez, and it stayed in the royal collection until the Napoleonic invasion of Spain. And here you see Joseph Bonaparte, who was installed by Napoleon as king of Spain, known as the Intruder King. And of course, this part of history is probably most famously known through 2 paintings by Goya of the 2nd and the 3rd of May 1808, which were painted in 1814, which was around the time that Joseph Bonaparte, or just before the time of Joseph Bonaparte's eviction from the throne. And he took his collection, Joseph Bonaparte did, not back to France, where he was and his brother were persona non grata, but to New Jersey. And Joseph Bonaparte built an enormous country estate called Point Breeze. This painting of the estate is in the Art Institute of Chicago, and prominently displayed is this version Napoleon, his brother, crossing the Alps, which stayed in the family and then went back to France. And it's now in the Chateau de Malmaison. But it would have been prominently displayed for visitors to Breeze Point, New Jersey, just outside of Philadelphia. And the painting itself, here, let's go back. Let's go to, the painting itself was lent by Joseph Bonaparte's daughter in 1816 to the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts in Philadelphia, where it was displayed with American still life paintings like those by Raphael Peale and others. So it had a public presence already by 1816 and 1818 when it was displayed, and then again in the mid-19th century. And during its loan to the Academy, Point Breeze burnt to the ground. And had that loan request not gone through, we don't know what would have happened to the Sánchez Cotán, but it has certainly endured its fair share of unforeseen circumstances, some good luck, what was likely a difficult transatlantic crossing with Joseph Bonaparte's collection, and finally sold to the Putnam sisters in the 1940s, and it has been in the San Diego Museum of Art since 1945. It travels. It's not as much as some people would want it to travel, because we get requests for it quite a lot, but it's absolutely an honor to see it here at the Meadows, which is such a wonderful resource for Spanish and Hispanic arts. So it looks perfectly at home amongst the Renaissance masterpieces upstairs, and I think Sánchez Cotán himself would be absolutely delighted to be surrounded by these earlier Renaissance paintings and sculpture in the gallery upstairs. So to get back to what exactly was Sánchez Cotán doing, because his paintings, as I mentioned, they don't look like although still life was a relatively new tradition. It had come out of Greek painting, which we only know about through written descriptions, and Roman painting as well. But it reemerged, and Sánchez Cotán occupied this space in the intellectual elite in Toledo. And Toledo also, Toledo's the church capital, basically, of Spain. It's the primate of the Spanish church is there, the Archbishop of Toledo. Madrid is the royal court center. But Toledo was also central to innovations in the realm of agriculture and a food revolution, essentially, in medieval Islamic Spain. Going through Sánchez Cotán's library, a number of things stand out, and one in particular, which is Viñola's treatise on perspective, which he owned. He also owned musical instruments. He owned other treatises, not many, but a few. Some indicate an interest in music, and these are all in the inventory that his two friends drew up before he left for the monastery. And piecing together the other extant still life paintings that are listed in this inventory, we see still life with game fowl in the Art Institute of Chicago's collection. The remarkable thing about this is he's taken the San Diego composition and added several things to it. 4 birds and a chayote, which you can see. Let me see if I can use the pointing device on here. Okay, laser pointer, and this is the chayote right here. This is a product of the Americas and was imported to be grown in Spain following conquest of Mexico. And this is what a contemporary modern version of the squash looks like. He chooses all of these things very, very intentionally, is my understanding, and he changes the composition by plugging in individual objects that have specific, I think, a specific meaning, because they're all part of the Spanish culinary history and part of the cuisine in this part of Spain. So what looks deceptively simple is actually, there's actually more to it, and I'll talk about his technique in just a minute. But here's another one of the still life paintings that has survived with carrots. You can see it in different colors. The cultivation of carrots was also an important part of the culinary history of this part of Spain, as well as, of course, the lemons and blood oranges. And then this one here is still life with game fruit and vegetables, including a large cardoon that comes right out of the picture plane into the viewer space. And here he's added some game birds and songbirds and apples that are, again, like the San Diego picture, hanging from twine from an unseen hook just in front of the window ledge. This one of cardoon and carrots, again, slightly different variety of carrots, is in the Museo de Bellas Artes in Granada, and it actually came out of the cartuja. So he took this one with him, or he painted it in the cartuja, and it was acquired by the museum in the mid-19th century. Finally, here's a still life of the cardoon again, coming out of the picture plane, slightly more vertical format he's experimenting with, and the francolin, which is a game bird that was hunted, at least in the Iberian Peninsula, hunted to extinction by the 18th century. Here's a modern view of this beautiful game bird. It was something that was imported from Turkey and North Africa, and it makes appearances throughout as an actor on Sánchez Cotán's stages, and it would have been an important part of the cuisine of the 17th century. And the cardoon, you can see growing here, which looks a bit like celery. It's a thistle, but it's also, this part is consumed. Looks a bit like rhubarb. But it was another important part of the diet at the time. Then, not long ago, Peter Cherry published this, and this is also described in the inventory, the still life with basket of cherries and asparagus. It also includes, fascinatingly, a floral still life, not unlike the two flowers that appear in the Immaculate Conception painting that we looked at a few minutes ago, but also an American ceramic vessel. And these are called bucaros, and they're typically made in Mexico of a certain type of red clay. And these are two beautiful dimpled varieties of these bucaros, and one of the more famous of these vessels actually appears in a painting by Velázquez, Las Meninas. And here the princess is being offered a drink of water from one of her ladies in waiting from this Mexican ceramic vessel. Velasquez also uses American cochineal in Las Meninas, so I think these additions are both on Sánchez Cotán's part and Velasquez's part are intentional indicators of Spain's transatlantic, global kind of empire, reach, and economy. Still life painters pick up the mantle of still life painting in the generation after Sánchez Cotán. Juan van der Hammen, whose family was Flemish, but he was a court painter in Madrid. He painted still lifes that also featured American vessels, sometimes chocolate and other sweets feature in his works. And Antonio de Ponce on the right here. These beautiful still life paintings from the 1620s. And likewise, Juan van der Hammen, as a royal painter, also had access to the royal collection. And so like Velasquez, he also knew Sánchez Cotán's still life firsthand. And so in 1627, you can see he actually quotes Sánchez Cotán's Persian cucumber, or derivative of a Persian cucumber, here in the lower foreground of the Williams College still life with basket of fruit. And I'll get the laser pointer out here. He intentionally stages the cucumber in the same position as Sánchez Cotán's here, with perhaps not as acute a trompe l'oeil effect as Sánchez Cotán, who really staggers the viewer with the way that the object actually breaks through the picture plane. All of the food, all of the vegetables, produce, fruit, and game are all related to crops that were really developed in the Islamic agricultural revolution in Toledo and Granada, and the court horticulturalists and scientists were really making strides as far as agriculture, the importation of new species of fruits and vegetables, and the leading court botanist, Ibn Basal, lived in Toledo in the 11th century, and his book, The Anthology of Husbandry, was actually translated into Castilian in the 13th century. He's got an entire chapter on melon and cucumber cultivation. This is all part of the Umayyad agricultural revolution in Iberia that made this part of Spain the most advanced agricultural system in Europe. So from everything from watering systems to what they could grow was a revolutionary for Spanish cuisine. And we also see the emergence in this early time period in the 16th century of the first cookbooks in Spain. One in particular in 1520 by Ruperto de Nola, the Book of Cooking, and it was published at Charles V's behest in 1525 in Castilian, and this would have been readily available certainly in Toledo among the circle in which Sánchez Cotán existed. In particular, the cocido madrileño, which is a staple dish, comes out of Sephardic traditions of the Adafina, which before the Sabbath, Jewish cooks could prepare a slow-cooked stew overnight so that the cooking would not have to happen on the Sabbath. And cabbage, in particular, is a mainstay of that particular dish. So we start to see attention being paid to what is growing around Toledo, and the gardens and agriculture are very organized, and of course these treatises are written on it. And someone like Ibn Basal could travel throughout the Middle East and North Africa, and what he did was he collected samples and seeds and he brought them back to Spain, and then perfected their cultivation in the Umayyad court. And so, turning to Sánchez Cotán, we see quince, cabbage, and then this melon that's been opened, partly consumed, and then, of course, that cucumber that keeps coming out at us. And we wonder, what does this mean? This is an artist who is presenting an image of apparent simplicity to the viewer, but imagine that this was just one of a series of paintings that he would show to his visitors, including the Archbishop, to his studio, in which he might begin with the now lost empty composition, then move on to the number 2, the San Diego composition. And what he would do is and new research by Carmen Ripoyes has shed some light on this. He kept drawings in his studio, which is not unusual. Many artists would rely on drawings, but he would keep a drawing of, say, that quince, and then insert the quince into the painting. And we know this from recent technical analyses of the paintings, and so each of these might be added one at a time via model drawings, and so. In the San Diego composition, which I think is iconic because it's so stark. The void is one of the main characters in the composition, and if you look at the mysterious quince and cabbage, how they're hanging suspended. If you look closely at the twine, the two twines, they're not hanging parallel. They're actually tapered in, which gives the sense that the objects are in motion, like they're swinging back and forth, just very gently, as though their placement had been fairly recent. So whoever had cut the melon and clearly consumed part of the melon has also just hung the two objects on the left, and they're still moving. Maybe there's a breeze, but we get a sense that there's someone around. And this is part of the mystery, part of the suspense of Sánchez Cotán's idea. This is completely unlike the Italian still lifes that are being done, or most of the Flemish still lifes. This is something that was meant to stay within his studio, and he had this ability or freedom to be completely experimental with the ideas of time, presence, and this control over nature. And I think he also understood that his paintings are of things that were not meant for display. They were meant to be eaten. And it seems simple, but he is inviting the viewer to take part in that experience. And so he's involving the viewer, reaching out through the picture plane to involve the viewer in the drama that's unfolding in these really simple objects that may have something to do with everyday cuisine in this part of Spain, but he's using them in a wholly experimental new way. Like I said, these were not compositions meant for public consumption, and he gave them specifically to people who he knew loved and appreciated the works. What of quince and cabbage today? As I mentioned, it's been at the San Diego Museum of Art since 1945. It's found a home, although it does like to travel occasionally. It's found a home in Balboa Park amongst a museum facade here that is based on the University of Salamanca in Spain, in this platter-esque kind of surface decoration type of presentation. The way that most of us enter Balboa Park is via Bertram Goodhue's Cabrillo Bridge, and you walk past the California Tower, which is sort of a Mexican revival or a stage type of decoration based on Mexican colonial architecture. But the bridge itself is impressive, and it's also based in part on Trajan's Bridge at Alcantara, which spans Portugal and Spain, and has endured the test of time, even though it was partly destroyed during the Napoleonic invasion. It was rebuilt. And elsewhere in Balboa Park, the architects were very clearly referring to other examples of architecture that could be found in Spain, especially in Granada. When you compare the reflecting pools from the Alhambra to this is still existent, but this is a 1915 photograph from when the park first opened up, and you can see the comparison is very self-explanatory. And just to wrap up before we open it up to questions, I go back to the two masterpieces that I started with, Las Meninas and Sánchez Cotán's still life, which is upstairs, and the idea of them as paradigms of cleverness and skill, and Velázquez is really a dissertation on the nobility of art. And so when we ask ourselves what more is there to say about such iconic works, the fact that we can go back to them time and time again and see new things and experience new emotions, new insights. Both these paintings are constantly viewed by contemporary artists, and the Sánchez Cotán has influenced a vast number of contemporary artists who are still working today. So from 1600 or 1602, this work is still reaching out of the picture plane to grab the viewer, and I'm delighted to see it here at the Meadows Museum amongst all of its friends. So thank you very much, and I think we're going to take questions now. And I think we need to wait for the microphone so that our viewers on Zoom can hear the questions.
Hi. Thank you so much for that. I wanted to speak up directly on your conclusion with the idea of creating a paradigm of cleverness and skill. I'm not going to try the Spanish version of that. Could you talk a little bit more about the virtuosity and the ways in which Sánchez Cotán is kind of working out that cleverness in the painting, and obviously the illusion. But
yes.
I'm struck by the person in the signature, for instance, who seems to be constant, mysterious, even that. So I wonder what your thoughts were on sort of the kind of the last minute tricks of this particular.
Well, I think the placement of the signature is very deliberate. It is a phenomenon that we find in some Flemish still life paintings as well, where things are signed on the front of a ledge, or in Flemish cases, it's usually a table, because they were breakfast displays. He is involving himself as the maker, as the inventor of this work. And while it wasn't intended for public display, he was using it for a specified audience. And I think he also understood that certainly by giving it to the Archbishop, he was ensuring or giving this painting the best chance at surviving for generations beyond his creation and his life, for that matter. And again, once Velázquez takes over, he understands the importance of the work because he had learned from his father-in-law, Francisco Pacheco, about Sánchez Cotán's importance as an illusionist. That was his strength. And so when Velázquez is hanging the San Diego work, along with the La Barbuda de Peñaranda, which is a very unusual subject matter, a historical figure. This is a so-called bearded woman. They were hanging also. They hung together in the Pardo. These are really unusual compositions. Unlike his religious works, they're typically in either the Cartuja or in museums now. So he understood the longevity. He understood time. He understood optics, and he was, in this sense, like Velázquez, pintor sabio. He was the scholarly painter who had studied everything from perspective and religion to music. I hope that answered a little bit. He certainly perfected the hyper-realist, virtuoso kind of application of paint. He also understands the use of slight impasto highlights that also would have influenced Velázquez, but Velázquez was drawing on other painters as well, Rubens and Titian especially. But Sánchez Cotán was able, through his study of nature in his drawings that he would then use to transfer each individual object, he was able to combine that with an intellectual grasp of what exactly he was doing and how to involve the viewer. And that part is really what Velázquez picks up on in his works early on, even in 1618. So, okay. Thank you. That's a great question.
You make this point, the signature out.
Oh, yeah, sure. I've got my, this is the signature here. Okay, right on the top of the windowsill ledge. And there's been a ton written about what exactly this cubbyhole represents, whether it's in a cellar. It's designed to preserve fruit and vegetables. But Sánchez Cotán uses it as a presentation stage, essentially. And when the artist Colleen Smith made her video installation that was meant to open on March 14th, 2020, opposite this, she had a window crafted in her studio in Los Angeles and created light effects through this half-hour-long video installation. It was remarkable, and so another one of those instances of contemporary artists really, it just continues to resonate. Any other questions? All the way at the back. And thank you to our Zoom viewers. If you have questions, please type in the chat. And thank you for attending the lecture tonight. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks so much. And maybe following up on Stephen's question, but also taking advantage of you having been fortunate enough to be around this painting so many years, all about carefully. It's a strong painting. Strongest painting that we cite on the screen right now. But it's the strongest painting you showed this evening.
Yes.
And for those of us that aren't specialized in Spanish 17th century painting, could you sort of walk us through why it is stronger than other Sánchez Cotán paintings? You've done a bit.
Yeah.
There's so much praise to be done in explaining what is special about it. It is so special. Thanks very much.
My pleasure. The way that I have always looked at it is that the painting is pared down to the most essential things in the artist's imagination, things that he's drawing on from the life of Toledo. He's in a two-dimensional painting. He hasn't, there are no game birds that are hanging. There's the black void, which is fascinating to look at, especially when the painting is not under glass. But even just looking at it in person upstairs, you get a sense of this. It's both infinite and impenetrable. And that kind of tension is part of the strengths of the work. So the composition is deceptively simple, harmonious, but it is, like Las Meninas, it is at its core a brilliantly successful work, brilliantly successful execution. The quince has this, little bruise on it that suggests that, okay, it's ripening. You have to cook the quince, by the way, and membrillo. If you ever go to Spain, quince jelly is basically what this fruit is turned into quite typically. The melon is, at peak ripeness and has droplets of juice visible, and a stray seed. All of these things are down to the last little detail, are intentional on the artist's part. And I think when you compare this to other Sánchez Cotán works, the declutter strengthens the overall composition. It stops visitors in their tracks pretty literally, the way that Las Meninas does, or a Mark Rothko. Very best Mark Rothko, has that kind of infinite and yet impenetrable type of recess in the single color kind of background. It's a painting that I first saw in a 35 millimeter slide in 1992 when I was an undergrad, and it stayed with me ever since. And that's there are paintings like that, but when you can remember that you wrote down in your student journal San Diego, that stayed with me all those years, and it's been an absolute honor to be able to share it with the Meadows, to share it with other museums, but especially here where it really is in such a great setting. And for me, the opportunity to talk about it has been so gratifying. I feel so lucky to be able to talk about this and to be here. So thank you all for coming, both in person and via Zoom. Thanks again to everyone here at the Meadows for welcoming me to your beautiful museum. So, any other questions? I'm not leaving.
We actually have one or two questions.
Okay, great. Thanks, Anne.
So the first question is about how many Sánchez Cotán still-lifes there might be in American collections. Do you have a sense of that?
Yes, there are two. There's San Diego and Chicago. There are a total of 7 that survive. 2 are in private collections in Madrid. One was in a private American collection that after the collector passed away, the collection was sold. But for the most part, they are in Spain. So 7 survive. The most recent discovery was the one with the basket of cherries, which was in 2010 that came up. It's still in a private collection in Madrid.
Thank you. And there's one more question in Zoom. Terry is wondering if any scholars have posited that there's Christian symbolism in these still life paintings.
Absolutely. I think that, as a product of the Counter-Reformation, the the still life would have been understood as a bodegon al divino. These are examples of God's bounty in Spain, and although it looks simple, the delight of the melon in particular is an indicator. And in fact, for a couple of years anyway, we had in San Diego, we had the Sánchez Cotán in the center of a gallery that is called still the Art of Devotion. So it's hanging with Zurbaran paintings of saints and Mary Magdalene, and it seemed just perfectly at home in amongst these devotional works. And of course, the knowledge that Sánchez Cotán had joined the Carthusian monastery, he was not a cloistered monk. He was a lay brother, which meant that he would assist the choir monks, who were the hermits. They actually had no contact with the outside world, and their food would be delivered to them through a turnstile type of arrangement. So they really didn't interact with anyone. They prayed all day long. They had little walled gardens for each cell, so that they could get some exercise that way and cultivate a garden, sometimes vegetables. But Sánchez Cotán was certainly a devout Catholic, and for that reason, there have been writers in the past that have suggested that there is some Christian symbolism in the painting. However, I read it. I'll accept that absolutely, but I read it more as an intellectual kind of experiment and visual experiment on this artist's, completely. It's kind of like Rembrandt's drawings or Goya's drawing notebooks, where they were working just for themselves and for their immediate circle of friends, and so for that reason, he's got this freedom to experiment. And he's using different pigments than he uses in his devotional works, in some cases quite experimental pigments and materials. And I think I got a little bit off track as far as the question goes, but yes, because he became a lay brother, which meant that he had public duties, and as a painter, he had responsibility for maintaining the decoration of the Cartuja with paintings and by conserving older works and so forth, including sculptures, that was his job. So I see definitely both sides of it.
All right, I think we can end with one more question coming in through Zoom. Susan was wondering if you can comment on the shifting shadows and source of light in this work.
Okay, so the primary light source is it would be over the viewer's left shoulder. So coming in from a rather steep angle. This also suggests that both the quince and the cabbage are hanging outside the window ledge, hanging from a hook that would have been on the face of the so the same kind of area as where the signature is, but above the windowsill. And so they are not actively casting shadows. You can see a shadow on the right side of the quince. But it's not casting its own shadow, or if it is, it's casting it into the abyss, this black void, where the shadows are strongest are in the left corner of the painting. I'm thinking about this, about a 30-degree angle in here. And then the shadow that the melon, this is not a cantaloupe, it's a different type of melon, but it looks like a modern cantaloupe. It casts a shadow on the slice that's been arranged, and sits precipitously on the ledge, and then, of course, the two shadows that are cast by the cucumber. The one on the front of the ledge here is angled down because the light source is coming from way up here, and it's also casting a different angle, the shadow on the surface of the ledge. This creates a sense of time, I think. The viewer is immediately aware that there is a light source, there are shadows, there's the potential for movement, and actually the indication or implication of movement because of the angle of the twine and the subtle movement of the quince and the cabbage. So shadows play an enormous part in the illusion of the work, and heighten its realism and heighten the drama, certainly, of that cucumber that it continues to amaze centuries later.